Good morning and welcome to Park Community Church. Today is a very special Sunday. It's Mother's Day, a Sunday that we set aside every year to honor those who are worthy of our gratitude and praise. Every one of us alive today has a mother, the one chosen by God in whom He formed us and brought us into this life. Of all the women He could have chosen, she is the one He selected for you, the one He had prepared to be the instrument of your birth. Not every woman can be a mother. It takes a woman with special God-given abilities, much like the mother whose letter I'm going to read to you now. This is a letter from a loving mother to her son. She writes, "Dear son, I'm writing this slow because I know you can't read fast." Oh, did I say she's a redneck? She's a redneck. We don't live where we did when you left. Your dad read in the paper that most accidents happen within 20 miles of home, so we moved. We won't be able to send you the address as the last Arkansas family that lived here took the numbers with them for their new house so they wouldn't have to change their address. This place has a washing machine. The first day I put 4 shirts in it, pulled the chain, and I haven't seen them since. It only rained twice this week, 3 days the first time, and 4 days the second time. The coat you wanted me to send you, Aunt Sue said it would be a little too heavy to send in the mail, so with those heavy buttons, so we cut them off and put them in the pockets. We got a bill from the funeral home, and it said if we didn't make the final payment on Grandma's funeral bill, up she comes. About your sister, she had a baby this morning. I haven't found out whether it's a boy or a girl, so I don't know if you're an aunt or an uncle. Your Uncle John fell in the whiskey vat. Some men tried to get him out, but he fought them off playfully, so he drowned. We cremated him, and he burned for 3 days. 3 of your friends went off the bridge in a pickup. One was driving, the other 2 were in the back. The driver got out. He rolled down the window and swam to safety. The other 2 drowned. They couldn't get the tailgate down. Not much more news at this time. Nothing much has happened. If you don't get this letter, please let me know, and I will send you another one. I just couldn't resist sharing that with you. Let me share with you some very familiar commandments that God gives to parents. In Proverbs 22, verse 6, God says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." When giving the law to the nation of Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it's recorded that God said, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." And then in Proverbs chapter 31 at verse 28, we see the response of the children to a godly mother. It says in Proverbs 31, "Her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also praises her." I've got a question that I want us to consider this morning. What does God put into these women He calls mothers? To help me answer this question, I considered the mother that God chose for me and for my sister Marta. And I call this a recipe for motherhood. Within my mother and all those God prepares for motherhood, He places these ingredients. 1, the love of God. We read in John 3:16, the love of the Father who loved the world so much that He gave His only begotten Son. God the Father gave His very finest. He gave His only Son. And then in Romans chapter 5 at verse 7, we read of Jesus' love. It says God demonstrates his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were sinners, while you and I were living in rebellion towards him, he sacrificed his life for us. He said, I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. You see, with God, people were the first priority. Jesus came to this world not to judge the world, but to save the world. Saving men and women from sin and reestablishing their fellowship with God the Father was paramount. So my point is, people were number one with God. His love is outstanding and beyond human understanding. I was born in December of 1945 at the end of World War II. My father was a career military man, and over the course of his time in the Army, he made some serious mistakes. And so when I was born in December of 45, I was born to a single mother because my mother and father had already divorced. So when I came into the world, here was my mom, a single mom with two kids. At a very bad time in the history of this country, things were still in turmoil. But what I saw in my mom, not only then, but over the course of my childhood, was that I was a priority to her, that I was her first priority, just as the human race was God's first priority as demonstrated by his love. I know over the course of my childhood that there were many times that my mom went without in order to provide what my sister and I needed: school clothes, books, supplies, food, and a roof over our head. Sometimes she worked 3 jobs in order to provide for us. So by her actions, I saw her love. I read in 1 John chapter 3, verse 18, it says, let us stop just saying we love people. Let us really love them and show it by our actions. And there is no doubt in my mind or my sister's mind that our mother loved us with all of her heart, because all that she gave up in order to serve us. The second ingredient I see that God places in mothers is a heart of worship, much like the heart of David. In Acts 13, Paul testifies that God said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will. David loved the Lord, and my mom loved Jesus. Often she and I would talk, and she would tell me of her Catholic schooling and her love for Jesus. And I know that sometimes in conversations about the Lord and about the things of God, I can remember her eyes filling with tears, and she actually cried. My mom read the Bible all the time, and she read it to me. And there wasn't a day that went by where she and I didn't pray together. We prayed every day. She told me all the Bible stories: Noah and the ark, and David and Goliath, and Moses and the Red Sea, and all of the famous Bible stories she taught me as a boy. She took me to church. We went to Southeast Baptist Church, a little tiny church in Kansas City, and she saw me baptized. And then on one occasion, I don't know where we were or when this actually was, although I remember I was still just a boy. We went to some strange church. I guess maybe we were out of town or away from home, and Mom was determined to go to church. So she got Marta and I ready, and she loaded us up, and we went off to a church. And Marta and I, just a couple of weeks ago, were actually talking about this. She said, do you remember when Mom took us to that church? And I said, boy, do I. Because the people in this church, they were hooping and hollering. They were jumping all over the place. They were shouting and making noise. And my sister remembers, and so do I. I got under the pew, and I told my mom, I'm not coming out from under here until those people settle down. My point is, my mom was determined to take us to church no matter where we were and what that was going to entail, because my mom truly had a heart like David's to worship the Lord. I was a handful. You need to know that. I put my mother through a lot. And so I believe that one of the ingredients that God placed in her was the patience of Job. My mom's trips to school actually began when I was in kindergarten. I hadn't gotten very far. I'd only been in school a couple of days when my mom got a phone call and said, "Will you come to the school, please?" And so when my mom arrived, they told my mom that when we call on your son, he doesn't answer us, he doesn't respond. And so my mom inquired, "Well, what do you call him?" And she said, "Well, we call him Forrest." And my mom said, "Well, that is his name, but he's always gone by Sandy." So from that day forward, the teachers called me Sandy, and we never had that problem again. However, that did not conclude my mom's trips to school. My mom made many trips to the principal's office and usually found me sitting in a chair when she walked in the door. I mean, this was a pretty regular occurrence for my mom. I would jokingly tell people that my school major was hall sitting. I was actually in training to be a hall monitor when I grew up because I spent so much time right outside of the classroom next to the door. At 18, I dropped out of school and joined the Navy. I was ready to live my life my way, and so I did. But there again, my mom, my patient mom, prayed for me for 32 years that her prodigal would return. And you know what? He did. She saw God fill him, take him through college and seminary, and then call him to pastoral ministry. And so, patience. My mom truly had the patience and the stick-to-itness of Job. Next, I think God places within mothers the wisdom of Solomon. In 1 Kings chapter 3, we read, Solomon's crying out to God, and he says, "Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" Then when you read on a little farther in that same chapter, there's a story of two mothers, two women who came to see the king. And they arrived with two babies. However, one was dead. And they were both claiming that the baby that was alive belonged to each of them. And so again, what did Solomon do? I think he relied upon the wisdom that God had laid to his heart, because as you read the story, what he proposed to the two mothers was, how about I take a sword and I cut the baby in half and I give each of you half the baby? And one of the mothers cried out and said, "Oh no, don't do that. Go ahead and give the baby to her." And just in her action and response to his proposal, he discerned who was the real mother, was the one that didn't want to see her child harmed. And so she ended up leaving with the child. My mom had the wisdom of Solomon. I actually don't know, other than prayer, how she achieved it. There were times when, after I was of a driving age, that my friend Danny and I would sneak my mom's car out of the parking lot at night when she had settled in for the evening. And we'd push it out of the parking lot and get it out on the street before we'd start it up, because I had punched a hole in the muffler so that it would sound cool when me and my buddies were driving down the street. And so one night we took off in my mom's car. And it wasn't very long that the telephone rang at the pool hall, and I was called to the phone, and my mother was on the other end of the line and said, "You get home here with that car." How did she know I was there in the pool hall? How did she know that that's where I was? Except God gave her the wisdom of Solomon. I couldn't pull anything over on my mom. She was so smart. Lastly, one of the things that I see that God pours in to mothers is the devotion of Mary, his mother. Jesus has said to all who will follow him, he says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am with you always, even to the end of the age." That's what I see in Mary. Mary was always close by. She was always with her son. She was there in Cana when Jesus performed his first miracle. She was there when he was arrested and drugged before the magistrates and falsely tried. She was there at Calvary when he was hung on the cross. She was there, one of the first ones to the empty tomb to see that he had risen from the dead. She was there in the upper room with the other disciples and apostles when God poured out his Holy Spirit. And yes, she was there when Jesus ascended back to his Father in heaven. Mary was always with her son, always supported him. And that's exactly what I experienced with my mother. My mother would stay up night and day and make sure that my needs were being met. Until I was home, she would call and make sure that I was okay and just that everything was well in my life. And she did that all the way throughout my childhood up until that Friday night when she very quietly and peacefully went to be with the Lord due to the cancer that she had been stricken with. These are just a few of the ingredients that I believe God chooses to use in the creation of a mother. I'd like to close with a poem entitled "A Mother's Love" by Helen Steiner Rice. A mother's love is something that no one can explain. It is made of deep devotion and of sacrifice and pain. It is endless and unselfish and enduring, come what may. For nothing can destroy it or take that love away. It is patient and forgiving when all others are forsaking, and it never fails or falters, even though the heart is breaking. It believes beyond believing when the world around condemns, and it glows with all the beauty of the rarest, brightest gems. It is far beyond defining, defies all explanation, and it still remains a secret like the mysteries of creation. A many splendored miracle man cannot understand, and another wondrous evidence of God's tender, guiding hand. Will you bow your heads with me in prayer? It's possible that some of you who are listening to me have had less than an ideal childhood. Maybe you were placed up for adoption at birth, or maybe you had a mother who was less than a godly mother. If that's you, I'm truly sorry. There's no way I could know the particulars of your family life or the lack of one if you missed out. But one thing I am certain, you have a mother. And if things in your past have separated you from your mom, would you consider that no matter what it is, God is ready and willing to forgive both you and your mother? I have known for some years now it's all about reconciliation. God wants to heal both your pain and your past. He wants to help you find the way back into a loving relationship with your mother. Will you pray about this? Will you trust him to make a way where there seems to be no way? If you will, he will do, and you do your part. He promises to do his. Those things only he can do. Take some time, Consider the things I've said. Then let His Spirit direct you in whatever you need to do. Father, I pray for all who have heard this message this morning. And as I've just stated, some have had a very checkered childhood. And Lord, I pray that you would pour out your grace on these. Lord, I pray for all others. I pray that this would be a day that they would remember their mothers, honor their mothers, reach out, call their mothers, send a card. Let their mothers know how much they love them and thank them for the loving care that they provided as they grew up. Father, I thank you for this day, the day that we make a special effort to praise and to honor our mothers. And I pray that for every mother today, that this would be a blessed day as you pour out your grace upon them. These things I now ask in the name of Jesus, your Son.